Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I am your host, Evan Abrams, and I am joined, as always, on this fun wild card week with Brandon Anderson. We're together for the recap pod, the best bets pod, but this is different. This is the playoff futures pod, which we will talk about Super Bowl, conference, some Super Bowl MVP long shots that both Brandon and I like. But Brandon, first of all, what's going on? It's a happy season. I know for a lot of us, when it goes from 32 teams to 14 teams, it's nicer to dive into these teams individually. But what do you think? Happy season.
Yeah, it feels good. And we go 14 down to 8. Everyone is always like checking in on me around this time, like, oh man, how you doing? Like it's playoffs. Or I'm like, no, this is great. Like we're chopping off half the teams each week. The job gets easier and easier. These are the teams we know their strengths, we know the weaknesses. So I mean, easier in some retrospects, but I'm in a celebratory mood right now. I got my NDSU hoodie on, 10 championships in 14 years, FCS, home in North Dakota to celebrate that one. We're only 14 teams left in NFL now. 9 of the 14 have at least 3% implied Super Bowl odds. 6 of the teams have at least 5%. Detroit, Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo, Philly, Minnesota. So we're really narrowing in on who can win the championship now. And so, yeah, we've got today, I've got a Super Bowl bet and one bet to win a conference. I've got 5 Super Bowl long shots. This is just kind of a quick one to get some futures on the docket that hopefully, if you've been following all year, hopefully folks are adding to the portfolio, not starting new, but just hopefully getting us off on the right foot. And then we'll be back at the end of the week with our usual best bets and go through the whole slate like usual.
Yeah, we are going to go one by one here. We're going to start with Brandon's Super Bowl. I'll give a few angles on it. I'll just toss you a stat, and this is something I used in my article, which is up on Action Network, and it's futures related. So since 2008, the eventual Super Bowl champion has at least come from the top 8 in Super Bowl odds entering the playoffs each year, including from the top 6 in each of the past 11 seasons. The last team to win outside the top 6 in odds entering the playoffs are the 2012 Ravens. So usually these longer shots tend to not make it all the way through, at least in recent form, when you've got Mahomes winning Super Bowls every year, it seems like. But the top 6 in odds are the Lions, Chiefs, Ravens, Bills, Eagles, and Vikings, with the 7th being the Packers and the 8th being the Bucks last time I looked. So just a little stat, a little, setup here. Now, Brandon, who's your Super Bowl bet? And kind of walk us through that one.
Yeah, so this shouldn't be a big surprise. This is one that we've talked about, a team that I like much of the season. I'm back in the Ravens, plus 600. At most books, they're 6-1. You're going to find a lot of consensus on Super Bowl odds right now. So here's the case. The Ravens have been the best team all season by most metrics, really. They're number 1 in DVOA. They were the best team last season, regular season by most metrics. This year, they are the 7th best DVOA team ever. They've been tracking since 1978. They're 2 spots behind last year's Ravens team. That's how good this team has been over 2 years. And I know we know what they do about in the playoffs so far. We know Lamar Jackson hasn't got the playoff wins. We know their reputation, but the playoffs are a very small sample size thing. And we have a large sample, 2 full seasons of data that says the Ravens are really, really good. Number 1 offense, number 1 rushing, number 1 passing. That offensive line was a big question coming into the season. They've really reworked that and found their way. Zay Flowers, once he gets past the injury, Pro Bowl receiver. Him and Bateman and Isaiah Likely have really stepped up. Derrick Henry obviously has been a monster this year, almost 2,000 yards rushing, 16 touchdowns. He's the guy I wrote back in March when they signed him. I might actually be able to believe in this team in the postseason because of Derrick Henry. That's the closer. That's the hammer that gets better and better December, January in the weather. And we've seen it. You got Lamar Jackson with his ability to move and scramble. You've got Derrick Henry, power rush up the middle. And then you have Lamar extending plays, passing over the top. There's just no defensive way to cover horizontally and vertically the entire space of the field. When the Ravens are rolling, there hasn't been really an answer for them. And now, over the back half of the season, defense, top 5 also, about as good as anyone in the league, especially big leap in pass defense. We talked about it. Marlon Humphrey back into the slot. Kyle Hamilton mostly at safety, not moving around as much. Dean Pease and Zach Orr, they've really kind of got the defense right. Todd Monken did not have a great game calling last year in the playoffs, but he's been doing a pretty good job calling plays this year. We love the coaching. John Harbaugh, really the whole package. Ironically, under a Harbaugh team, the only real weakness might be Justin Tucker, and those special teams have not been reliable this year. But for much of these last couple years, the only real team that can actually beat the Ravens is usually the Ravens. They beat themselves sometimes. Lamar has made some mistakes late. They've had some questionable play calling. But now look at the path. They're playing Pittsburgh. They just destroyed Pittsburgh a few weeks ago. Then they play Buffalo in all likelihood. They beat Buffalo 35-10. Henry had almost 200 yards in that game, and the Bills have been bad against the power run all year. They came an inch away, literally, from taking the Chiefs to overtime in the opener, the Super Bowl winning opener in Kansas City. I think they're the better offense and defense in that matchup. I really can't find a matchup where I don't like the Ravens. In the NFC, I'm going to like the Ravens better as the more complete team. And even though I have my doubts about Lamar Jackson, the better quarterback than any NFC team has to offer, more explosiveness. There's just no spot where I don't like the Ravens. So obviously the one thing you don't love here is they're the 3 seed. So they're probably going to have to go on the road to Buffalo and Kansas City. What I like about that is books know that too. So that's priced in. And if I think they're the better team, I'm getting a little bit better odds on the pricing. So I have Baltimore 27% to win the AFC, almost 18% to win the Super Bowl. FTN has them 21%. That means I should have Baltimore around plus 400, plus 450. We're getting a plus 600. So that's my monologue on the Ravens at the top. This is my team. I have them plus 1100 from a few weeks ago, but I still like them even at plus 600 here. Ravens for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, if you look in the futures market, Baltimore and Buffalo are priced exactly the same. So it's really just saying, as long as both those teams take care of business against Denver and Pittsburgh, which I think we agree 8.5, 9-point favorites both. Pick your poison. Which team do you like better? And that's probably a decent price this week. So I completely get with the Baltimore pick. I think the thing I'm scared of, which you mentioned, is a little Zay Flowers. Like without him in the offense and the amount that they tend to rely on him in certain areas, it's a little scary making Rashad Bateman your one. But I completely understand it. I mean, they just dominated Pittsburgh. So all good there. Before I toss it back to you for conference, which I don't even really have like a conference championship pick. The one thing I was going to talk about here was kind of the rollover versus the futures. The 3 teams that I listed were the Chargers, Commanders, and Rams, as I think opportunities to potentially like make a run. I like those 3 teams in the first round mostly. And I think, using the Chargers as an example, minus 150 right now on the money line in the wild card. You assume they win the game, they would get what? Probably the Chiefs, unless there's an upset.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's like plus 300. And then after that, it's if they beat them, Bills, Ravens, you assume a similar price. So even getting to the Super Bowl, the Chargers are 30-1 in the market right now. They'd be about 25-1 with those 3 bets. So I like those 3 teams. I just, shop around, try to find creative ways of doing that. But that is my rollover Super Bowl bet spiel. Let's go to you for the conference bet here. So you have a little bit of another side because you kind of probably like these 2 teams to meet in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I like the Eagles plus 350 to win the NFC, and I'll talk about why NFC and not just a Super Bowl bet here. Ironically, I actually said last January, I wrote an article, who will be next year's fill in the blank of the teams that have been good a year ago. And I thought the Eagles might be last year's Ravens this year, and they're kind of looking the part right now. They got both new coordinators. I thought that they might start out slow, and they did. They were 2-2 into the bye week. Then the defense took over. Vic Fangio got Jalen Carter, got Zach Bond unlocked at linebacker, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean we've seen at corner. Those rookies really taken over. Since the bye week, this is the number 1 defense in football. They're allowing under 16 points a game since the bye. They've allowed 20 or less, all but 2 games in that span. And only really Washington's the only team that really got to the defense. And Washington had 14 going in the 4th quarter. So really, if you think of it that way, since the start of October, the Eagles defense has had 1 bad quarter. That's a pretty good defense and a pretty good spine. And then we already know what they're on offense. They are the best running team in football. Running the ball is even more important in the weather in these playoff games. They're the best offensive line in the league. They have Saquon Barkley, who pretty much should have broken the record, but sat out the week. He can score anytime. The weak link here, the question mark, is the passing game. When they have A.J. Brown, Devontae, and Goddard healthy, they've been about as good as anyone, but it's inconsistent. And Jalen Hurts, I don't love having a ton of money on Jalen Hurts because I don't trust necessarily that he can make the big play. He does have the tush push, still valuable. He's been more valuable scrambling this year than designed runs. That's a more valuable run play anyway. I don't love him as a passer. And if I get to a Super Bowl, now I have to have Hurts against a quarterback that I'm going to like better. Mahomes or Lamar or Josh Allen, or even if they get that far, maybe Herbert or Stroud. I'd probably still rather have those guys than I'd rather have Jalen Hurts. I don't like having the worst quarterback in a Super Bowl matchup. I probably will make the Eagles underdogs in the Super Bowl. So I'm kind of back to your rollover situation here. I like the Eagles, but I'd rather just take them in the NFC and then decide what to do from there in the Super Bowl. To me, this is the formula from 2 years ago when the Eagles made the Super Bowl, only now they have Saquon Barkley, and now they have better coordinators, offense and defense. A little unlucky getting the Packers here in the first round, but a little lucky that maybe Jordan Love is still hurt and Christian Watson is hurt. And again, boosting our odds a little bit because the books know too that it is a more difficult matchup. So I think it's the most complete team in the NFC. I have them 31% to make the NFC, to win the NFC. FTN is at 30%. That should be about plus 225. We're getting a plus 350. So that's my bet. And like you said, if you like both of them here, Ravens Eagles head-to-head Super Bowl is 16-1. I would have that around 10-1 odds. Ravens over the Eagles Super Bowl is 30-1 if you want to do the parlay, the Matt Moore exacta, if you will. So those are my two picks heading into the playoffs here.
Yeah, I like the Philly pick. We're going to talk about Super Bowl MVP futures in a second, and I think focusing on the best teams and a long shot on the best teams is an interesting angle to take, and I'm going to talk about Philly in that one. But really, their path to the Super Bowl, Philly's only going to be an underdog against Detroit. Aside from that, you're going to be favored to win the games. And at that point, it feels like an investment right now on that price, either at your NFC price or in the market. There's 7-1 to win the Super Bowl, which I don't think is a bad price there either, considering what you're basically betting on the two games. Or if you lose it before that, you just lost your bet. Right. Pretty simple there. All right, Super Bowl MVP futures. I will let you go first because I have a lot of names written down because I really just think some of these are defensive players. And from my point of view, it's literally $5 or so. And it's going to win you, over 1,000 on a few of these. But you're kind of just investing, in my opinion, on some of the good teams, rooting for those good teams to get within a game of the Super Bowl. And if they get there, you'd probably throw the $5 on them anyway. And hopefully they're, half the price, a third of the price. Yeah. All right, you go first.
Yeah, so what I'm looking for here is one of two things, and you kind of hit the nail on the head, I think, here. Either I want the quarterback mispriced of a long shot team, or I want a not quarterback mispriced of a more favorite team. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. Since 2010, 15 Super Bowl MVPs, 11 quarterbacks. Look, we know that. We're going to give the award to the winning quarterback. That's what the award usually goes to. If it's not that, we do have two defenders in there, and we have two receivers. Before that, 3 of the last 5 in 2005 to 2009 were receivers. So receivers are in the mix here. Running backs, not in the mix. Do you know, Evan, who is the last running back, or when was the last running back to win Super Bowl MVP?
I'm taking a complete guess, and I actually should know this, but Terrell Davis? I don't know.
Terrell Davis is at 1998. Wow. That's how long it has been. Almost 3 decades now. So I've got 5 picks for you here, all long shots. These are all like quarter unit, $5 type bets, whatever you want to do. Just a little nibble here. Yep. But let me give you a first quarterback to kind of fit what I'm looking at here. And a surprise here, because I don't even really love this team, but Matthew Stafford is 66-1 to win Super Bowl MVP. Now the Rams are 35-1 to win the Super Bowl at most books, and that's really the entire bet for me. Stafford would only have to be the MVP in about 54% of all Rams Super Bowl wins for that to be a better bet than just betting the Rams, and that's the bet here. It's a value play, even on a team that I don't believe in, because in what world, how many times do the Rams win the Super Bowl and it's not Stafford winning MVP? Okay, well, I can tell you one of them, the world that happened already, because Cooper Kupp won MVP when Stafford won the Super Bowl. However, 13 quarterbacks ever have won multiple Super Bowls. Only twice has a quarterback won multiple Super Bowls and not at least won an MVP. Bob Greasy and Big Ben. I think if we finally get to a second one and Stafford has the crowning achievement to his career, it's got to be him. Maybe it's the Puka Nakua Cooper Cup thing again, but we know if the Rams win, it's the passing. That's what they're good at. The path is pretty good. You get the emotional letdown Vikings, Sam Darnold road debut. Then you probably at some point get Stafford against the Lions. We've seen that matchup. We've seen him go head to head with them and be able to beat them. Stafford at his best, I don't trust him to get to his best enough, but at his best, he matches throw for throw with any quarterback in the NFC, even those guys in the AFC. So I think if you just expect maybe the Rams get hot and Stafford, Nakua, and Kupp just tear through teams, 66-1 is just a way better bet than almost half that price for Rams. So that's one bet on a quarterback here. Do you have any quarterbacks on your list that you're looking at for Super Bowl MVP?
It was so funny. So Stafford's on my list as well because I picked the Rams, and I completely agree with you that the price is just a little missed, just in the fact that like if they got there and it was on his back, I think his odds just should match their Super Bowl odds a little closer. I was tempted by Puka, who's like 150, considering he would be like the media loves him. And I think the Super Bowl MVP tends to be a media award in that sense. And no quorum means Kyron's definitely going to get all the carries in that type of game. So 170 to 180 to 1 was intriguing, but I agree Stafford's a great pick there. Now, the other two I even considered was Hurts. Because again, the tush push, which I was pointing at the screen when you mentioned that the first time. I feel like that's a huge advantage in that type of game. And that can bring him over the top, even with Saquon there and what he can bring to the table. So Hurts was intriguing. The other one I was Jaden Daniels. I liked Washington on the rollover. If I think that they have a run in them, I mean, he's the story. His price should almost be no different than their Super Bowl price. There's just no way they're ever going to consider someone else in that game if the rookie gets there. So I just felt like his odds should be kind of dead on. But those are the quarterbacks I liked.
Yeah, those make a lot of sense to me. I looked at Daniels as well for the same reason. The other quarterback for me that I will play is Jordan Love, 36-1 odds. And again, very similar sort of case. Packers odds are 22-1. We've heard me talk a lot about the Packers down the stretch here. I'm in on this team. I believe in this team. Love only has to win MVP 62% of Packers Super Bowl wins for that to be the right price for him. And again, in what world do the Packers win 4 games and go to the Super Bowl? And there could be a lot of reasons they win games. It's a solid, complete team. But who else is winning MVP on this team other than just like a one-off performance? Josh Jacobs, or like literally who's the next name down the list? Is there like Jaden Reed or just a defender or something? Love is the budding superstar, and winning a Super Bowl is not budding anymore. You're the superstar. So I wanted the Packers to be the team I just gave out, not the Eagles. I'm worried a little bit because of the Love injury and because the path that's there. But the reason I love them is coming into Sunday, they were the number 1 DVOA team over the last 6 weeks. They're top 4 rushing and passing, offense and defense. And I know the main argument against Green Bay here is, well, they're 0-5 against Philly, Detroit, and Minnesota. Okay, let me spin that a different way. Green Bay lost twice to Minnesota by 2 points. They lost an walk-off field goal to Detroit. They lost to Philly in a close game in the opener with their quarterback hurt on an ice rink. To me, what I hear is they've played the toughest competition they can possibly play in the NFC, and they've gone head-to-head, down to the wire, coin flip games 4 to those 5 times. That, to me, says this team can actually hang and has proven it can hang, rather than some of the other teams that are getting beat up by these top teams. And again, like I've said a few times, we're getting value because of the tough path. The 7 seed is not fun. Only one 7 seed ever has even won a game. That was the Packers. This Packers team a year ago, they almost won twice. So I like the Packers here. I wanted to bet Packers. I couldn't because the odds aren't in my favor. Adding Jordan Love MVP in, rather than a 22-1 Packers to get a 36-1 MVP, now it's in my favor. So I like Jordan Love. One other quarterback worth mentioning here, not a team that I believe in, but the Texans are 100-1. CJ Stroud is 150-1. Again, I have to believe if you like the Texans, Stroud is the better bet than the Texans themselves. So those are my other quarterbacks. Anything else from you before I jump into my one running back pick?
Honestly, the other skill players that I had listed here was Lad McConkey at 150, which I thought was kind of intriguing. But I know how much you like the quarterbacks with Herbert, and Herbert's also priced higher than the
Yeah.
Chargers. I don't know how many times Lad gets the MVP if Herbert doesn't. But he also has the ability to get like 10 plus catches and 2 plus touchdowns and kind of had that big game, I believe, if the Chargers do get there. And Devonta at 100 to me was interesting. All the attention goes to AJ. Hopefully, everyone plays in the game, and then someone like that has a big one. And the other one, I just can't leave without, with what's going on to Zay Flowers. Rashad Bateman's 600 to 1. So I just felt like, there's an option for like a long touchdown, or Baltimore gets there. Flowers has complications. And even if Flowers plays, maybe he's a decoy. They're down to him. So I felt like at that price, that was the most intriguing. The other thing that's kind of funny here is Montgomery's not even listed, and I know he's supposed to be back for the playoffs. So it is a media narrative award, but I assume when he does get listed and he is active, it'll be way too short to even consider. But I could see him sniping some touchdowns in that situation. And then I had a bunch of defensive players, but I can list that when you're done.
Yeah, so the running back that I love here is actually what prompted me to want to write about the MVPs. Probably no surprise. I love Derrick Henry here, 45 to 1. The Ravens Super Bowl price we just gave out 6 to 1. So Henry would only have to win MVP about 15% of a Ravens Super Bowl win in order to get that award. Compare that to Jahmyr Gibbs, that he's about 23%, or Saquon Barkley 31%, double what Derrick Henry's price is. And look, I know no running backs win this award, but it is kind of the year of the running back. That's the media narrative right now anyway. And I think Derrick Henry has the obvious narrative of what's the big change that put them over the top. He's the piece that the Ravens haven't had the last few years. He's the guy that's going to be running well. The stats will be there. He scored a touchdown 13 out of 17 games. He's at 100 yards or more rushing over half of them. He's at least 150 combined yards, 6 of the games. That's a third of them. And we've been doing that bet all season. When the Ravens win a game, Henry to have 100 yards and 2 scores. He's done that in over a quarter of all Ravens wins lifetime for his career. Is that chicken or egg? I don't really know. But when the Ravens win, Henry puts up numbers. He put up decent numbers against the Eagles the last time. I like him in the other matchups there as well. I think Lamar's crowning narrative, if they won the Super Bowl, might just be too strong, even if he didn't have the better numbers. But Henry's going to have the stats at 45 to 1. I think that's a great way to invest. And then I'll give you a chance to list your defenders here, because my one defender I bet is Cal Hamilton, 1,000 to 1. He's only 0.7% of all Ravens Super Bowl winners. He's their defensive weapon. He's the guy I think that would make the big play, the big sack, strip sack, safety, interception, return sort of thing. So because I love the Ravens, because they're my Super Bowl pick, he would be mine at 1,000 to 1. What other defenders did you have before I get to 2 receivers and get out of here?
All right. I had Kirby Joseph. He was at like 600 to 1. Kyle Hamilton was actually on my list as well. So we both like Kyle Hamilton. On the side of Kyle Hamilton, I like Marlon Humphrey. I could easily seeing him do a pick six or have some sort of impact in that type of game. And Cooper DeJean, same deal. I like the Eagles. I think there's a chance that a corner makes a play. Obviously, I think there's 2 positions. It's a corner or an edge, because you've got to have like a touchdown or a strip sack and a recovery or a pick six. Like there's got to be some sort of massive play. So I feel like those are the 2 positions to kind of look at. But back to you.
All right, I'll finish out here with 2 receivers, both with mostly the same last name. Probably my favorite pick out of all these is Amon-Ra St. Brown, 75 to 1. I think just a terrible price still hung out there. The Lions are favorites to win the Super Bowl at plus 320. Amon-Ra would only have to win the MVP 5.5% of all Detroit wins for that to be the right price for him. Jared Goff is the number 2 MVP favorite, and maybe that should be the case here. Maybe you just bet the quarterback and winning team like we've said. I don't know that I believe Jared Goff would be the winner. I'd be looking at their position of players or even like defender on this team. Amon-Ra's price is closer to Jameson Williams than it is to Jahmyr Gibbs. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If you look at the guys who are winning Super Bowl MVP as a receiver, let me give you some numbers and names here. Cooper Kupp, 8 catches, 92 yards, and 2 scores. Julian Edelman, 10 for 141. Santonio Holmes, 9 for 141. Deion Branch, 11 for 143. Those are Amon-Ra St. Brown lines. That is what he does in games, is volume, catch a lot of passes, put up the numbers, move the chains, and do it on third down and do it in the red zone. We know he gets the touchdowns. We know he's the third down target for Goff. Those are high leverage plays that we're going to remember as voters in the Super Bowl. So I love him here. He's my favorite play. He averaged last year 7 catches for 91 yards in the playoffs. He owns the middle of the field. I think this is just an egregious price for St. Brown, 75 to 1. And then a similar name, A.J. Brown, 100 to 1 still at one book. The Eagles at 7 to 1. That's just way off. Justin Jefferson for the Vikings would win in over 20% of their wins. A.J. Brown's under 8% by that pricing. So I think that's a bad number for him. I do like Amon-Ra better, kind of fits the profile of past Super Bowl MVP receivers there. But A.J. Brown can just explode at any given time. And we've seen with the Eagles, when they get the right matchup, when they see how open he is, they aren't afraid to just spam the A.J. Brown button over and over again and just go back to him. Baltimore was really bad by DVOA against wide receiver 1 all year, so that could set up nicely for him. Chiefs and Bills finish around league average against the pass. I like these receivers from the NFC facing the AFC possibilities in the Super Bowl. A.J. Brown was 18 to 1 last Super Bowl and a popular bet to win MVP. So if we like Philly to get to the Super Bowl, 100 to 1 is a crazy price. So those are the two to wrap up here. Amon-Ra and A.J. St. Brown.
Yeah, those prices though, I just feel like it's worth investing, especially we were talking about it. I think the dart throws should be put on the teams you believe most will be there. And you kind of work backwards from there. All right, well, that is a lot of bets in like 20 or 30 minutes. So get out your notebooks and hope you enjoyed all of that. This has been the Action Network podcast. I am Evan Abrams. That is Brandon Anderson. We will be back for Best Bets. Stucky and Raybon will be there. The Fantasy Flex will be there. So we will have tons of content all week on actionnetwork.com and Action Network podcasts. And look forward to seeing you on Saturday for the games. See you later, everybody.